Lijep pozdrav, poštovani gledalci. Pratite N1 intervju. Ja sam Mika Ferrer-Gotić. Bliži se 11. juli, dan kada se obilježava godišnjica genocida u Srebrenici. Ove godine to je 24. Dakle, 24 su godine od najstrašnijeg zločina počinjenog na evropskom tlu od holokausta. Vrijeme je da otvorimo ona očigledna pitanja, ali ona koja se rijetko ili nikako iz ovih ili onih razloga ne postavljaju. Prema informacijama iz Memorijalnog centra Srebrenica Potočari, do sada su identificirane 23 žrtve genocida koje će biti ukopane ovog 11. jula u mezarju Memorijalnog centra. Za još oko 1000 se traga. Zašto je negiranje genocida na prostorima zemalja Zapadnog Balkana uveliko prisutno? O srebreničkom genocidu se uveliko govori van naših granica. Odgovore na ova pitanja potražit ćemo od Ministrice za djecu i omladinu Škotske, koja danas boravi u našoj zemlji, gospođe Maree Todd. Mrs. Todd, welcome to Bosnia and welcome to N1.
Thank you.
This is your first time in Bosnia, right?
It is, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here.
But why are you so drawn to this country?
So the charity, as you say, Remembering Srebrenica, has been set up to encourage leaders in Scotland to come and find out about what happened here, to learn lessons, so that we can learn lessons about tackling hatred and intolerance and hopefully use those lessons to build a more cohesive society and be better at the work that we do at home in Scotland. But there's been really long-term links between us in Scotland and Bosnia. So there's been, during the siege of Sarajevo, aid came from Scotland, from Scottish people to Sarajevo. So there's been some long-standing links.
We go way back.
We go way back.
Together.
Yeah.
You had an early start in Sarajevo with the British ambassador to Bosnia and Hercegovina, Mr. Matt Field. What did you talk about?
So from Matt, we learned quite a lot about how things are at the moment and how things have been since the peace agreement. We learned a little bit about what led to the war in the 1990s, but there was a lot of discussion about how things are now, particularly for young people, what opportunities there are, what economic opportunities there are, and whether there has been a great deal of progress made since the peace agreement. I think it's very hard. And I think it's fair to say as an outsider that it's quite hard to make progress with the peace agreement that was made, where there are 3 parties essentially that can veto each other's activities. So it was interesting for us to hear about that and to hear about some of the really good things that are happening. So there are some really positive things happening.
What are the positive things?
So he told us about a business, an amazing music venue that's been set up in Sarajevo, between a business between a Muslim, I think he said, and a Christian, so 2 ethnic groups who set this business up together deliberately to encourage groups and communities to mix. And I would have to say I think that's a good thing.
But unfortunately, we do have problems with minorities where they still don't have their basic human rights. Something that we have to look at.
So that was a revelation to me that certain people can't stand for government here. So you have a presidency with 3 presidents from 3 different ethnic groups. But if I were, a Jewish
Roman
person
or Jewish,
you can't stand to be president, and that seems a very basic human right.
Basic human right. That's discrimination.
To be able to stand for election, to be able to vote in your country, and to be able to stand for election in your country. Those are very basics. So that was quite surprising to me to hear.
With that level of discrimination, we can hardly even think about joining Europe, your Atlantic agreement. We have to solve the minority issues that we have in this country.
I mean, as I understand it, there's a number of steps that have to be gone through before Bosnia-Herzegovina can join Europe. And whilst there is progress in some areas, progress has been very slow overall. I mean, in our situation in Scotland at the moment, as part of the UK, because of the vote relating to Brexit, we are leaving the EU at the moment, despite the fact that we in Scotland didn't vote for that.
We hope for soft Brexit for you, even though it doesn't look like that. All right, Srebrenica, tomorrow is going to be your first time visiting Srebrenica, a place, a town in eastern Bosnia where genocide happened in 1995. What do you expect to see, to learn, to feel in the end when you're there?
Well, I mean, to feel, I think, even in the time running up to coming over here, I felt a lot of very mixed emotions. It's very hard to comprehend what happened here and to make sense of it. I'm a mum of 3, and I was in my early 20s when it happened. And I just, you know, it is incomprehensible what happened here.
In one of your statements you said, every time genocide happens, the world says never again, but yet we see it happening all over again. And genocide in Srebrenica was actually the worst massacre, worst atrocities against humanity on European soil after Holocaust. We do see genocide happening again in the world. We saw Rwanda, we saw it in Srebrenica, we saw Rakhine with Rohingya. How do we cope with that? When do we say enough is enough? When do we really start learning from history?
So I mean, I guess I can't answer for the world, but what I can say in Scotland, so this charity has been set up with that purpose in mind. So these delegations are coming here to try to learn those lessons, to try to understand what factors contributed to the genocide that happened here, how did that come about, and to try to find the protective factors as well, so try to discover what might prevent that happening in other places. Is it important to have economic security? Of course it is. Does that always protect a country from genocide? Then no, not necessarily. And I think one of the things that's really striking about what I've learned so far today in just one day is that there aren't really simple lessons to be learned here. It's very complex, and it is a disservice to come here and think that you can absolutely understand what happened. But what we can do, we can bear witness to it. So I can leave Sarajevo on Monday and I can tell people what happened here, and I will tell people what happened here, and that's a very important thing.
That is a very important thing. Many young Scots are unaware what happened on European soil in Bosnia in the 90s, especially when it comes to Srebrenica genocide. How important it is to learn these historic facts?
I think, I mean, it's vitally important. So education is undoubtedly a protective factor.
How much do they know already?
So
not only children, but grown-ups as well.
So people my age know very well. We remember seeing this on the news every night. I was in my early 20s, late teens, in fact, when it happened in 1992. By 1995, I was living in a different part of Scotland, and I was lodging in a house with a woman whose son-in-law had been here during the Olympics, and we watched the news together every night, and she mourned, we mourned with you about what had happened to this beautiful city. So we felt in Scotland a connection with Sarajevo because of the Olympics.
And a gold medal for Scotland. So
the UK won. I mean, it's part of our. It's an iconic part of our history. We won a gold medal for ice skating. Torval and Dean did the Bolero here in Sarajevo in 1984, and anyone my age can tell you about that. Can remember watching it on the television, and then less than 10 years later, we see the devastation, the breakdown in law, the murder, the slaughter, and the absolute devastation of this city and of the country.
There is an ambition to place the massacre in Srebrenica, the genocide, in Srebrenica in the school books in Scotland and all over UK, actually. Just a month ago, I had Ma Salim, the activist, here in the studio, and she said she will be fighting to place historic facts about genocide of Srebrenica in the books, school books in the UK, and you are advocating for the same. Is it already happening? Is it already there?
So it does happen. We have, as part of our curriculum in Scotland, children will learn about hate and intolerance, and they will learn about the Holocaust. Almost all school children learn about the Holocaust. Many will also learn about other genocides, so depending on the interest of the class or what's relevant for the class or what's relevant for the school teacher, they might learn about the Roma genocide in the Second World War. This month we're celebrating Roma Gypsy traveller history in Scotland. We have a whole month looking at it, and one of the things that we're doing is commemorating the Roma genocide. But yes, this most recent and very close genocide that happened here in Bosnia-Herzegovina, undoubtedly many children do learn about it, but not all children, and it is important that we do. I mean, we have lots of programs outside of school where people learn as well. So the charity does a lot of work, that Remembering Srebrenica Scotland does a lot of work to raise awareness. We had an event at just very recently at Glasgow Caledonian University in Glasgow, so for older children and adults.
And students and adults. I will remind one more time of the charity, Remembering Srebrenica Scotland. Was established as a charity in 2015.
Yes.
And organizes commemoration events to mark the acts of genocide in Bosnia and Herzegovina in the 90s. So there are commemorations in Scotland.
Yes.
Every year, regularly. All right. Are you aware of the 10th phase of genocide in Bosnia and Herzegovina? And that is denial of what happened in the countries of the Western Balkans. Are you aware of that?
I have heard people talk about that since I've arrived. I mean, what I can say is that the international community is very, very clear that genocide happened here. Even though if it failed Srebrenica back then, absolutely. It's very clear. It's very clear. The international community is absolutely clear.
The National Court for former Yugoslavia, the International Justice Court, said massacre in Srebrenica is genocide. This was an interview for German Deutsche Welle. This is Serbian Prime Minister Ana Brnabić, where she openly denies genocide in Srebrenica. This interview took place in November last year, so November 2018. What do you say to something like this?
The international community is very clear that what happened here in Srebrenica and in several sites actually in Bosnia-Herzegovina was genocide.
And how would you react to a statement like this when you hear something like that? And this is on almost on a daily basis. So from multiple politicians, not only from Serbia but also from Bosnia-Herzegovina.
So it makes it very, very difficult to move on from the conflict, from the war, if there isn't an acknowledgement of what happened and an attempt to understand and an attempt to bring justice to the situation. All of those things make it very difficult to move on. And in most situations around the world where this has happened, that acknowledgement has been necessary to bring about reconciliation. So it's vitally important that there is further attempts to reach an acknowledgement and a shared understanding of what happened, and then progress can be made. The international community is absolutely clear, though, that what happened here is genocide.
How do you comment then on most international representatives in Bosnia-Herzegovina and across Europe when they say, you people have to move on, forget what happened, people need to move on now? Does that include forgetting what happened in Srebrenica, or stop talking, or not going into that story back again? That statement from most international representatives is also very tricky. It's a sword with two blades, seems like. How would you comment on that?
So like I said, for most countries who have been in this situation, an important part of moving on has been an acknowledgement of what happened, a shared understanding of what happened. And then it becomes possible to try to understand how that came about. It becomes possible for apologies to be made. And you know, it is not helpful to always be looking backwards. It's often not helpful to be apportioning blame, but it's very important to understand and acknowledge what happened. And then only, you know, often only then can progress be made. It's also important to remember it. It's important for all sides to remember it. And that's part of the importance in that is trying to prevent it ever happening again.
But when you hear a statement such as Mrs. Brnabić's statement, where her perception of genocide is...
her perception is wrong. You know, the idea that you have to eliminate everyone in a society for it to be genocide, that's clearly incorrect. And, you know...
What do you think we are lacking here? What do you think she lacks here in this particular case?
I mean, I cannot...
In your opinion?
I can't... it's a struggle for me to understand from her perspective what denial achieves. I think it holds everyone back on all sides. If you think about it on a very small human level, mostly it's important to understand what happened and then you can all move on. If you are denying what happened, or it is then impossible to seek justice and it is almost impossible to move on.
We mentioned the 10th stage of genocide, which is denial. We see that on a daily basis, not only in the countries of Western Balkans, I mean in the region, we see it in this country as well on a daily basis, which, as you said, of course, holds everybody back. It's hard to have those economic ties in order when you have something like this, cultural ties, when you have something like this. We always, when we approach the July 11th, we always begin to talk and to see our differences and not our similarities. Not the similarities. But there's another stage of genocide as well, which is happening, which we are aware of, and which we bear witness of, and that is triumphalism. We do see a lot of groups, we can say hate groups, celebrating genocide that happened in Srebrenica. How would that affect you? Does it affect you?
I mean, I think that would affect any human being. You know, your humanity would rail against the celebration of genocide, wouldn't it? And if it doesn't, there's something lost there, isn't there? You know, so any human being would find it hard to see a celebration of genocide and not be moved. It's I mean, it's very difficult to take simple lessons from what happened here. Very difficult. But there are some simple human lessons. So, for example, I mean, we were in the Museum of War Childhood today.
Here in Sarajevo?
Here in Sarajevo. And, you know, the resonance. I mean, I'm a mum of 3 children. And going through that, and I also saw toys that I played with as a child. It's very hard to imagine denying what happened here. It's very hard for me to imagine denying what's here. It would be hard from a human perspective to walk on by and not see. I mean, the stories are shocking and moving. It makes me want to hug my children. You know, there's one very important human lesson to, you know, tell the people you love that you love them. So there's definitely lessons for humanity here. I can't explain why some people react that way. That's part of what we're here to understand, but I'm finding it very hard to take simple lessons from what I'm seeing here.
Do you think that's a toxic recipe for conflict, for possible conflict?
I mean, it's difficult. So I hope
talk
not.
a lot of possible conflicts in the Balkans on a daily basis.
I hope not.
Headlines what they are.
What we know, I mean, what we know about brings about peace in a country, that's not helpful, is it, to peace? A cohesive society where people know and care about each other, where there's some social justice, where everybody is able to flourish. That's what brings peace in a country. And intolerance, hatred, celebration of genocide, which just sounds abhorrent to me, can't possibly contribute to peace. It would make it difficult for a peaceful
There's one statement you said as well, which really stood by me. Every child deserves the best possible start in life, no matter their background. And I'm absolutely determined to use my time in office to the fullest, working hard to make this ambition a reality, making Scotland a better place, making Bosnia a better place, Serbia a better place, and this region a better place. But messages like that makes all these nations and countries a better place.
So we talk all the time in Scotland. We want Scotland to be the best place in the world for children to grow up. We're determined to make that happen. And learning about what's happened here, you know, the importance, I mean, I'm struck. Today we've been learning a lot about the siege of Sarajevo. And I met one of our tour guides, was just 2 when he first became a refugee in his own city. And I think, gosh, you know, the impact that has in those very early years, the impact of not having enough food, the impact of that level of insecurity. He talked about when messages would come around the community, through the street. People would carry messages, and he said all the children would see the messenger coming and they would know that somebody had died, and they would run home, and the mothers would be crying.
The anticipation. There.
Now the trauma in your developing years, so the trauma, the physical trauma of not having enough food, and the trauma of not being secure, and of fearing, not being able to play, of fearing for your loved ones, of many children losing loved ones, all of that has an enormous impact for the rest of a child's life. So there are undoubtedly, I mean, again, it's difficult for me. It's only today I went to the museum. It's very difficult for me to draw conclusions. It was incredibly moving. But there undoubtedly, as I go on, I will be a better politician for what I've seen here today.
A better person.
And a better person.
What else have you seen in Sarajevo?
So, I mean, we did go to...
Your Twitter profile pretty much said it all.
We did go to another couple of museums, which were also very harrowing. We went to the Museum of War Crimes, which was almost all of us in the delegation found that very hard. Just to even look at the artefacts in that museum, very, very difficult.
It's not so long ago.
No.
That's not a distant history, that's recent history.
And we went to a gallery where there were a number of photos, and there were also some films as well. And in some of these films was footage that we saw in the BBC. So footage that I was thinking, I can remember seeing that news report. I can remember, that it looks so familiar to us.
Back in that time, wasn't there enough of public outrage for what was going on in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I had a lot of people sitting across me at this table that said, hey, we had no idea what was going on. We only saw a few headlines, and that's pretty much it. Do you think there was not enough, or there was enough of public outrage? Because it lasted for over 3 years. It
lasted far too long. I mean, I think what there was a real reluctance to interfere. And you've seen in times before what happened in Vietnam when America intervened. You've seen it in times since when the international community intervened in Iraq and in Afghanistan. It is difficult to get the balance correct when the external community interferes in what's happening in a country. And I think that's what held people back for so long. There was also a disbelief. I mean, even now, I mean, I heard a chap, I don't mean there's a denial. I mean, when I spoke to Rashid last night, and we talked about how similar our childhoods were, and how we would be wearing the same clothes, Levi jeans, listening to the same music, listening to Queen, listening to U2, listening to all of the same things, watching the same films. So it seemed incredible that could be happening in Europe on our doorstep to people who were just like us. And I think that may have...
a different reality.
Very different reality. So I think that may have held the international community back as well. It just seemed inconceivable.
There's, well, nowadays, the public outrage when it comes to international community for being quite inactive during the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And when it comes to Srebrenica, here we go back to Srebrenica, and it says, Bosnia is the tale of ignorance and inaction on European soil, which we are all carry the faces of souls of the survivors. We must remember Srebrenica, and if doing so ensure it never happens again to no one and nowhere.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think that's part of the reason for the charity that I've come with. That's part of their purpose. There is a sense that we let you down in the past. And that means that we want to make sure that we bear witness now to what happened, and that we make sure that we tell your story. And we attempt, it's not easy, but that we attempt to learn lessons and to make sure that can't happen again, and that can't happen again in our country, it can't happen in your country, but it can't happen in any country. These are lessons that it's important for the world to learn.
As history repeats itself, as we already said, so education, education, education.
Absolutely.
What can we expect in Scotland and United Kingdom in general to happen when it comes to commemorating Srebrenica? United Kingdom has a very strong point and stand when it comes to commemorating the victims of Srebrenica.
Indeed, so part of the delegation that's with me this weekend are work in museums, curating exhibitions at home in Scotland, and part of the work that's going on is cooperation between our museums in Scotland and the museums here in Bosnia and Herzegovina to make sure that we can have an exhibition next year, particularly to mark 25 years.
Quarter of a century.
A quarter of a century, but not long. I mean,
not long. It sounds like a big span of time, but it's not.
It doesn't feel so. It doesn't feel so long ago now to me.
Me neither.
So part of the work that's going on this weekend is making those links, looking at what would be most powerful for people in Scotland to learn, for people to really understand what happened here.
Children to start learning.
Children and adults, all of us.
And adults to learn. What did they tell you? Have you been to commemorations in Scotland?
So I haven't, no, not yet, no, but that will be part of my role. So everybody who has come on a trip like this with the charity, part of our role is to go home and tell the story and to be involved in commemorations, to encourage press interviews and things, just like this evening back home in Scotland, to make sure that the story is told and that these lessons are learned and that people it was a unique situation here. And there were lots of ingredients that were very unique to Bosnia-Herzegovina.
Why was it so unique?
Well, I suppose there were a number of political contributors, but what I was going on to say is that hatred and intolerance are not unique. So we have those everywhere in the world. Everywhere in the world there is that possibility that a community will be othered, and that people will turn against that community. We see it happening with horrifying regularity. There's a rise of Islamophobia in the world. There is still a problem with anti-Semitism.
Racism is there.
There's racism. There's intolerance of homosexuality in the LGBTQI community. We see all of those ingredients everywhere, all over the world, and it's important for us to understand and to challenge that and to tackle it and try to create an environment where that cannot flourish.
I'm very interested in how your trip to Srebrenica tomorrow is going to look like. Please make sure to inform us. I'm really, really looking forward to hear from you tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you very much for this time. And I know you are on a tight schedule. You're still sitting here in the studio with me. Thank you so much for choosing, taking time to speak to us and to speak about these very, very important matters.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and it's been an absolute pleasure to have this opportunity to talk to you about this. And I'm in awe of the resilience of people here, the strength and the spirit. So I will take that with me.
Thank you, Mrs. Todd. You are always welcome in Bosnia. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Poštovani gledalci, dakle, zašto je negiranje genocida na prostorima zemalja Zapadnog Balkana uveliko prisutno, a o srebreničkom genocidu se uveliko govori van naših granica, kao na primjer u Škotskoj? Odgovore na ova pitanja potražili smo od ministrice za djecu i omladinu Škotske, koja boravi nekoliko dana u našoj zemlji, gospođe Maree Todd. Hvala vam što ste bili s nama. Doviđenja.